Stephen A., are the Bengals the biggest disappointment in the NFL right now?
Thus far, yes. Certainly when you look at Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Boyd and those Mixon and those boys, they have too many weapons where you just expected more from them. You look at the AFC North, you just expect more. Now, obviously, it's because of the calf injury. We understand that. He hasn't been himself. And so I'm hesitant to really go in and really use the word disappointment because I understand why. If he was 100% healthy, or he didn't have this calf injury ailing him, I don't think that they'd be in the position that they're in. But when I see 4.8 yards per pass attempt this year, which is the lowest by any NFL quarterback through 4 games over the past 73 years, what that tells me is that you ain't really dropping back and looking to throw the ball downfield, which means you're not even looking and attempting to utilize your assets in the Chase and Higgins and others. I'm not saying that's the case, Dan and Damien, every single down, but the level of aggression that we're accustomed to seeing from the Cincinnati Bengals quarterback, I think has been, the offense rather, I think has been compromised to some degree because of the health of Joe Burrow. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it is disappointing because you know what this team is capable of. Super Bowl appearance 2 years ago, AFC Championship game last year. You looked at Cleveland with Deshaun Watson and Myles Garrett and those boys. You looked at Baltimore with Lamar Jackson and those dudes. And you still looked at Cincinnati and said they're the team to beat in the AFC North. That's what you said coming into the season.
Yeah.
Now we find ourselves in this particular predicament. So even though the calf injury to Joe Burrow plays a role, I still expected more than what I've seen.
Who you got?
I'll let you go.
So I think the biggest disappointment so far is the New York Giants.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I'm not totally out on Cincinnati yet is I still think they can get to 3-3 by the bye. Now, you just heard Joe, we got to go find a way to go on the road and get a win. But I think they play Seattle and then maybe Arizona in the next 2 weeks, and then they have the bye before San Francisco. So they're at Arizona, then Seattle. If they can find a way to get those 2 games somehow, some way. Now, Arizona's going to play them tough. There's no question about that. Then they get the bye. Then there's the chance to go, okay, Joe, have another week of rest. Here's the thing with the injury, Stephen A. It's not only affecting just Joe. It's affecting everybody. Okay. The offensive line, and you know this. Mm-hmm. The Bengals get into shotgun. They're in 11 personnel, 1 back, 1 tight end. They got their 3 wide receivers. They're in shotgun. The quarterback doesn't move. That's hard for an offensive line. Mm-hmm. So, the offensive line is performing lesser mainly because of the injury. And I still think, and Joe said it himself this week, that this is the best he's felt after a game since last year, obviously, since he got hurt in training camp. So I still think that there's the chance that this team gets to 3-3 before that bye week, and then they got a chance to play some big dogs in San Francisco and Buffalo. And so I'm not totally out on Cincinnati. This is why I say the Giants. And I love Brian Daboll. I think he's a tremendous coach. I think very highly of Mike Kafka, their play caller, and then Wink Martindale, their defensive coordinator. You go to the playoffs last year if you're the Giants, and you win a playoff game. It's hey, okay, here we go. And then obviously Philadelphia happens. They don't play well. But if we looked at this offseason, they re-signed Daniel Jones. Whether you think they overpaid him or not, they re-signed Daniel Jones.
4 years, $160 million, $92 million games.
It's a ton of money for a guy that threw 15 touchdowns. So, and somehow they get Saquon back in the locker room. Okay, so those 2 most important people on their offense are done. They draft John Michael Schmitz in the 2nd round, so reinforcements to their offense. They go trade for Darren Waller, and they bring in Jalen Hyatt, their draft pick out of Tennessee. So we took a team that went to the playoffs last year, whether you think they overperformed or not. Bang, we've added people. And then defensively, they draft Deonte Banks out of Maryland in the 1st round, and they go get Isaiah Simmons, and for a part of their defense, they re-signed Dexter Lawrence. So it was fair to, I sat here and I was my God, my goodness, they might have chased down the Cowboys. And all of a sudden, you're 1-3, and you've only played 1 good half of football against Arizona. So
I got to read this. Giants have scored an NFL worst 46 points this season. 31 came in the 2nd half against Arizona.
So they've scored 15 points outside of that 2nd half against Arizona.
Yes.
That's a massive disappointment for a team that
absolutely
came off of last year. And then I just railed off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 guys' names that were added to that team that are good players. That's why I sit there and I go, outside
who are
of
you putting it on? Because we had that debate. Mad Dog was here yesterday, and he said he's putting it on Daboll. Daboll thinks he's Nick Saban or Bill Belichick. in that we're putting and too much blame is being put on Daniel Jones?
Daniel Jones has underperformed this year. And I've said that it's okay for us to expect more from him because of the contract. Whether people like that or not, it's okay. So who am I putting it on? Like the defense hasn't gotten any takeaways. Saquon's injured. Daniel's got to play better than he did last year.
Yeah.
And he's not. Last year he was a problem solver. This year he's a problem creator. I can't listen to people, all due respect to Mad Dog. I've heard Mad Dog say Josh Allen misses Brian Dable. We can't say Josh Allen misses Brian Dable. It's Brian Dable's fault for Daniel Jones. So Daniel's got to play better than he did last year, and he's not.
I think, I think for me, the reason I wouldn't go with the Giants is because I think the Giants overachieved last year. I didn't expect the Giants. What they did last year was a hell of a coaching job by Brian Daboll with the personnel that he had. And so coming into this year, I thought they would take a step back. I didn't think they would take this big of a step back.
Yeah.
If you're the New York Giants, but I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Bengals, and I get the calf injury by Joe Burrow, which severely compromises not only him but everyone on offense on that team. But I just think just the expectations that we had for the Cincinnati Bengals coming into this season, I always felt like, and I'm pretty sure you guys feel the same way. Who's the main competitor against the Kansas City Chiefs? It's been the Cincinnati Bengals, roughly, sure. That's been the kind of the new budding rivalry with the Kansas City Chiefs, and to see Joe Burrow compromise and they can't do anything offensively.
All right, some label it the Nathaniel Hackett Bowl. Kimberly, which quarterback situation is more dire? Is it the Broncos or the Jets?
For me, I would say easily the Broncos is more dire. Because when you think of the investment made, not just picks, not just money, the players you gave away for a sure thing to get you a Super Bowl. And when I look at the Broncos right now, yes, they've had injuries, but there's nothing about the Broncos that gives me hope watching them. And when you have Russell Wilson at quarterback, you're a vet. Like, you need to know what you have. You need to be. This isn't just can you win your division, it's can you take us to the promised land of winning a Super Bowl. At least with Zach Wilson, his issue is not talent. It's always been maturity, it's always been confidence and what's going on in between his ears. And for one Sunday night, Zach Wilson had Taylor Swift thinking he was the best quarterback on the field. I think we still don't know what Zach Wilson is, but that unknown, at least there's hope within that. There's still room for him to develop and grow.
You're a fact-based person. Outstanding reporter for years. Do you have any evidence at all that Taylor Swift thought that Zach Wilson was better at Patrick Mahomes at any point?
That night, yes.
You have, where's the evidence? You have evidence?
He didn't throw an interception.
I'm talking about how she felt.
Oh, me and Taylor, we were texting on the side.
Okay.
She was like, "Ooh, who's that?"
You give me tickets?
No.
Go ahead.
And the Jets are in a more dire quarterback situation. Number one, known versus unknown. Right now, Russell Wilson's playing really good football. He's got 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, passer rating over 100 in 3 out of the 4 games. He's having a very good year considering that his number 1 and number 2 receiver missed significant amounts of time. He's throwing to a rookie in Marvin Mims, who's got a bright future in the NFL. But Russell's, like, if their defense wasn't a freaking disaster, we would be going, Russell's back, Sean Payton worked. We've got that guy back from Seattle. I think with the Jets, like, it's off of one great game for Zach Wilson, but it is like, can you do it again? And I'm interested to see if they could do that. And if we want to throw Aaron into the equation, no one's a bigger fan than Aaron, outside of maybe Stephen A. than I am. He'll be 39 plus or 40 coming off of this injury. So it's like we've got a quarterback that had one really good game that we feel great about off of that game, but we don't know if he could do it again, let alone consistently. Then we got a guy who's coming off a pretty significant injury, and hopefully he comes back and is the guy that we knew he was before. But Denver knows that, like, Russell's back to playing really good football. And that was the most important question this year, was Sean Payton going to get that done? He is. Russell Wilson's playing very good quarterbacking.
9 touchdowns, 3 turnovers. Give him credit where credit is due. First 3 weeks or so of the season. Let me say this. The Jets are in a far more dire situation. Let me be very, very clear about that. You better win this damn game. New York Jets, you better win this damn game. The The Denver Broncos defense is giving up an NFL high 78% of their passes for 13 touchdowns. They are surrendering a league high 704 yards, 7 touchdowns, 5.6 yards a carry against the rush. So they can't defend the pass. They can't defend the rush. You going to show up at MetLife Stadium when Taylor Swift is in the stands, but you can't show up against Denver? Oh, hell no. Hell to the no. You better win this game. Now, if this is a game, and let me tell you something right now. If the New York Jets, and I'm not talking about their defense was only giving up 20 touchdowns, since last season, which is second only to Houston. I'm not talking about the defense. We know the defense is going to show up. And if Russell Wilson doesn't have the greatest game in the world, well, that defense is a damn good reason why.
Right.
Zach Wilson ain't got that excuse. You just showed up last week, right? Did you show up against Chris Jones and the crew? Did you do that?
He did.
I think he did that, right?
I think it's the biggest game
Nationally
in Zach
televised
Wilson's,
game.
Biggest game in Zach Wilson's career.
Nationally televised on your home turf.
Right.
You going up against the Denver Broncos, the Denver Broncos, and you, the Denver Broncos that just gave up 70 a couple of weeks ago. That Denver Broncos team, and you gonna show up to Zach Wilson and you can't produce?
Here's my-
You better win this game.